Namaste, everyone. Good morning and welcome to our webinar today, celebrating International Women's Day. So every year, as part of Vaani, we host a webinar for International Women's Day to really unpack that topic further, to learn more about the experiences of being a woman. And today we've got three wonderful panelists with us to do exactly that. My name is Vipasha, and I'll be the moderator for today's event, this morning's event. And I'm really excited to dive into meaningful and probably quite varied conversations today with our three speakers. They're going to share their thoughts, their experiences, their learnings, and we'll explore what it means to be a woman, what the concept of the feminine divine is, and so many other things that are close to their hearts. So, as we all know, International Women's Day is an event that occurs every year. It has a global reach, and every year it has a different theme. So this year's theme that's been given by the higher authorities of International Women's Day is the theme "Give to Gain." Something which I think is especially pertinent, and I think our panelists can talk to very nicely. So if I just quote from the International Women's Day website to give a bit more of an understanding around what that theme is, it says, the Give to Gain campaign encourages a mindset of generosity and collaboration. Give to Gain emphasizes the power of reciprocity and support. When people, organizations, communities give generously, opportunities and support for women increases. Giving is not a subtraction, it's intentional multiplication. When women thrive, we all rise. I think that really nicely summarizes and helps us get to grips with what this Give to Gain theme means. And I'm sure our panelists will dip into this in today's conversation, and they'll also share more broad experiences and messages that they've come across in their life. So the way that our webinar is going to work is we'll hear some opening remarks from each of our panelists. We'll then unpack some of their ideas through a Q&A, and then we'll end with taking questions from the audience. So if you're joining on YouTube, you just have to type your questions into the chat function, and we'll pick them up and we'll pose them to our panelists. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our three speakers. And then once I finish introducing, I'll invite them to speak. So our first speaker is Prachiji Joshi. So Prachiji is a chartered accountant by profession. She's from Milton Keynes, and she works in a local tax advisory practice as a client service manager. She's also very involved in local community activity, local Hindu community activity, and she's the treasurer at her local temple, her local mandir. And she was also part of the 5th cohort of Vaani, which happened last year, which ran last year. So welcome, Prachiji. Our next panelist is Falguni Bhatt. Falguniji studied media and communications at university. By profession, she's a data protection officer, and she was part of the very first Vaani cohort, quite 4 or 5 years ago, I think. She's a lover of life, people. She has lots of different hobbies and experiences. And just an anecdote to share, she actually climbed Mount Snowdon yesterday. So she is energized with all of the fresh air from Mount Snowdon, and she's going on a really exciting trek in India in a few months' time. So welcome, Falguniji. Our final panelist is Janhvi Dadarkar. Janhviji is one of those people that organizations call when governance really matters. She's a governance expert by profession, and she advises at every level, including at the highest levels, from FTSE companies to governments to global membership bodies. Originally, she's trained as a corporate media lawyer. She now holds a portfolio of board and advisory roles, working with for-profit organizations, as well as policy think tanks and leadership organizations around the world. She's recognised as one of the 100 most influential British women in the Indo-UK space, and she was also the youngest and first ethnic minority member of the Institute of Directors Board of Examiners. And she now leads their program on programs on their flagship Chartered Director pathway. She's also a mother, sister, daughter, and a wife in a family that's a proud British Hindu family. So welcome, Janhvi ji. So I'm going to ask Prachi ji to kick us off, and then followed by Falguni ji and Janhvi ji. You can all just go straight after the one before. So Prachi ji, over to you.
Thanks, Vipasha ji, and happy International Women's Day to all. It's a very proud thing to be a woman. If you just see what is being a woman, it is from nature's perspective, it is just a person who breathes. It sounds really crude, but that's the very power that gives us the flexibility and adaptivity. Those are the skills. Because in the process of for giving birth, a woman's body has to go through a lot of changes. So from childhood to her old age, her body is changing so much. And for to adapt with this change, she needs to have that flexibility in her body and her mind as well. And this is a great power. With this, if this great power is combined with dharmic values, then it can help to progress a society and bring a transformation in a positive way. And we have seen these examples of these transformation in our history. So in Bharat, there are so many examples of women being in power and making those changes. To start with, as a mother to influence a child, we can see example in Jizabai, who who trained her son to gain his land back from invaders, to have become a proud Hindu and then help Hindus to gain their confidence. As an administrator, we can see an example in Ahilyabai Holkar. She ruled her state and enabled the people to grow the economy, trade, bring confidence in their faith by restoring temples. And we see examples of women going to the battlefields as well, in Rani Lakshmi Bai, and also Rani Abakar, who fought with, again, invaders to protect their people. So if this power of adaptability and flexibility is matched with dharmic values, it can help the Samaj tremendously.
Thank you, Prachi ji. Next, Falguni ji, if we can hear from you.
Namaste and happy Women's Day to you all. So today I'm representing those women who may feel they don't fit into normal Hindu or Indian society, may feel that they have to still prove their worth to be part of this society, or just may consider themselves as a black sheep. So for context, I'm over 40. In fact, I'm 45 years old. I have never been married and I don't have children. And today, as a Hindu woman living in the UK, I stand here as someone not incomplete, who society may pressurize us to think, but I see myself someone who's deeply whole, the other way around. So being Hindu has taught me that my worth is not defined by my marital status or any other labels that we may give to ourselves, but it is about my dharma, my truth, my path, my alignment with who I am meant to be. So firstly, growing up in the UK as a Hindu woman, we've got two worlds that we're navigating. In the UK, being unmarried at 40 is just normal. Its independence is celebrated and choice is valued. But within parts of our community, marriage is seen as a milestone, motherhood is seen as fulfillment, and being single can feel like a big question mark at times. And I'm sure any other singletons out there exactly know what I mean. So I've lived in that space between acceptance and expectation, and that space has taught me something profound, and I'm constantly learning. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it teaches us the concept of swadharma, on one's own unique nature or duty. So Krishna emphasizes that every individual has a path aligned with their inherent nature, so swabhava. And following that path is essential for spiritual growth. As an unmarried woman, sorry, I'm just giving you my example. As an unmarried woman, my path may not look traditional, but it is my path, and that is a sacred one. So moving on to even the theme where he said give to gain. For generations, women have been taught to be nurturing, be supportive, be devoted. But what we need to remember that nurturing does not mean that you have to raise children. It could mean mentoring, it could be serving society or community, it could mean caring for aging parents, it can mean creating a safe space for others. Devotion does not mean devotion to your husband. It can be devotion to the truth, to service, to spiritual growth. And motherhood energy we can express through our leadership skills, be compassionate, contribute. So womanhood is not one shape, and we should be really proud that as any type of women, we can expand those amazing qualities in whichever path we lead in life. Namaste.
So, namaste. I'm Janhui Dadagar, and loved what both Brachi and Falguni said, because it sort of changed what I want to talk about. So I was going to talk a little bit about this theme of give to gain, which is really about paying it forward. And what I wanted to talk about was leadership. But before I sort of talk about that, what I want to sort of say is that what Falguni mentioned is actually, I think, inherent in everything we talk about, because I don't represent a single person at all here. I don't represent myself. I'm unique. I don't represent the whole Hindu Samaj. I don't represent all of womanhood. And that concept of diversity, I think, is inherent in the Hindu Dharma. So I think the first thing to say with all of this is nothing that any one of us says is prescriptive. And for me, that is what I love about the Hindu Dharma and what gives me my unique characteristic as a leader in any way. So what I hope today brings for people is some thoughts and inspiration to what give to gain can mean in this diverse context. Because I think in the West, often homogeneousness has sometimes been prized. And I know Falguni sort of said we have choice here, but I would question that. And the reason I say that is there is a subtle mindset that happens in the West which prizes homogeneity. And I've seen that in the corporate world. If you look a certain way, if you talk a certain way, in fact, if you don't even speak with the unwritten rules, you are taken to the side, i.e. not promoted. So I actually think homogeneity is more there in the West, where labels and prescriptive, it makes life easier, doesn't it? If we're all the same, life is so much easier. But the diversity is what brings challenges. So what I wanted to talk about was really leadership and how leadership matters. And when we talk about leadership in the West, usually it's about power, accountability, and authority, the ability to command followers. And so in the space that I work, governance and leadership, unfortunately, most of our academic literature and everything that I have to talk about actually comes from a military stance. So even those words, strategy, comes from the military, and it's all about winning a war. And how sad is that if leadership is all about winning a war? And I know in the world we're in today, that perhaps feels like that's what we have to do. But to me, success and value have to be ascribed differently. And we'll probably talk about this in different ways. But for me, leadership that really matters, and what I think my mindset and my ideology gives me, is that it's not measured purely on how far I go. It's not purely measured on did I become CEO, did I become a board member. It's measured, in my view, by how many people you have given an opportunity because we were there to give them an opportunity. It's about what we leave the world in, what we leave the place for the next generation. And for me, women think like that, irrespective of where we are. We're always thought, and it's partly why in my brochure I said I'm a sister, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a daughter-in-law, I'm a granddaughter. I have all these different roles. I'm a CEO of a company, I'm a friend. With all of these different roles, it doesn't matter. As women, whether it's nature, whether it's nurture, we've been conditioned to think of others first. And so, in my view, from a leadership perspective, that's actually what we should value, not suppress. And that's what I'd really like to talk about.
Amazing. Thank you all for sharing your opening remarks. I think there's so much there just to reflect on within what you said, but then importantly, so much to unpack in the conversation that we're about to have as well. So you all touched on, of course, women's leadership, women's roles. And I'm going to just pick on that as like a first topic to explore. So Prachi ji, you gave a few examples of women from India's history, from Bharat's history, who are amazing, fierce women. Maybe other than maybe in small communities now, or some communities, it's not really known about who these people were or what they contributed, and specifically about their leadership. So what do you think is maybe one of the most misunderstood aspects of women's leadership across time and history?
I think when women lead somewhere, they are naturally thought as they are soft because they have this power of adaptability and flexibility. They are courteous. They try to change according to people's mindsets or things. So maybe that can be taken as a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think in a larger perspective, to bring a change or transform someone, you need to have that power to take forward everyone together to change their minds towards a certain way, to transform. So I think that is a great power. All these women, all these examples I gave, they are not done, they didn't made this change forcibly. They help people, they transform people, they took people on their sides. And I think that is a great example of leadership. And that's, as Janviji said, that is the value we should be, that skill should be valued in women, which you may not see in male leaders. Because as I said, generally the leadership from male perspective is found as who is a stronger person who can then command someone. So that is treated as power of leadership. But on the other side, when women are leading, they may be the courteousness or adaptability, flexibility can be a great power as well.
Yeah, okay, great. That was really, really helpful to understand. Thank you. Falguni ji, I'm gonna come to you now. So whilst you didn't speak about the women historically, as in historical examples, I think what's quite interesting from these examples that were mentioned, whether it is Rani Lakshmi Bai, whether it is Jizamata, none of them were known as wives of X, or their primary identity was not because of their husband. Even someone like Jizamata, who was Chhatrapati Shivaji's mother, she had her own identity very much in and of herself. So we can see that historically women did rise without any of these attachments, without being known as the wife of this person, the mother of this person, the daughter-in-law of this person. And they were respected and treated as such. Whereas now, perhaps, and I think I agree with you, that there is always a woman comes with a label of, she's the wife of this, she was the mother of this person, whatever that label might be. What do you think? We were at a place all those years ago, hundreds of years ago, where these women in difficult circumstances, were able to shed the labels, and despite whatever society was expecting of them, they still rose up. Now maybe we find it harder to do that. What do you think that shift has been? And I don't know, what can you speak to how we can take those historical examples, but also use them to create a forward-looking reality for women today?
Yeah, I think the issue is we're kind of stuck with these cultural restrictions, or we believe to be cultural restrictions, where some people talk about why do Karwa Chauth, but actually the concept of Karwa Chauth is just so beautiful. Women coming together, you know, like we have like women's circles these days in, you know, the non-Indian societies where women are celebrated, yet we want to see something like Karwa Chauth or many vrats that happens across of India as something which is undermining feminism. And that's not correct either. So I think we really need to embrace some of these festivals that we have and actually look at the deeper concept of them. So even something like Navratri, absolutely amazing festival. Yes, it's turned so massively commercial, but if we try and start kind of getting into understanding the concepts of those particular festivals, I think it's liberating for us, and it'll actually make us understand that there's more to women than just being this devoted wife or mother or, you know, whatever, or just this daughter-in-law, whatever status you want to give them. So I feel there is I think us as women need to kind of dive in deeper in those kind of traditional aspects as well. And so initially all those things might feel restricted to someone, but if we start understanding it, it will definitely help us to kind of appreciate our dharma and actually have a better understanding and deepen our self-awareness as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they're just using the examples of some of our festivals and how much feminine divinity is at the center of those festivals. And there's so many you can pick. You can talk about Raksha Bandhan as well. You can talk about Navratri. There's so many out there. And it's all about, I think, the perspective through which you look at them, the lens through which you look at them. And I think in the West, and this was a conversation actually that I was having with my husband 2 days ago as we were driving down to London, is all it takes is a shift in perspective to understand Eastern traditions and Eastern way of thinking as opposed to a Western way of thinking. Now, I don't think either is wrong, it's just they're both different.
Yeah, and I think you were talking about likes of Jijamata, Lakshmi Bai, but even prior to that, we are so fortunate that we have so many strong goddesses in our, you know, they're not all the oppressive kind of personalities. Absolutely not. Saraswati Mata, who, you know, represents knowledge and independence. You've got Durga, who represents strength and protection. You've got Kali, is all about transformation. That could be transformation within yourself as well. So it is like, you know, the ultimate self-realization. And we look to all these self-help books, but actually we've got it here in all our kind of Hindu dharma concepts, but we're running away from it, and that's a sad reality, actually.
Yeah, definitely. We can explore maybe how we can run towards it more later. So, Janviji, is there anything you want to add into that conversation? I do have a separate question.
There were 2 or 3 points from both, and what a point that you made towards the end about right and wrong. And I think we have to be really careful when we're speaking, both as women, because I don't know if anyone's seen the most recent stats on this, and it really scared me when I heard this, because I always used to say that this is a generational change, that as the generations grow, boys will be better, the younger generation mixes better. But recently there was a statistic that the majority of 18 to 24-year-old boys think that women and feminism have gone too far. Now that scares me, because if boys are thinking that, that means somehow in all this debate, in all this discussion, we've lost the true meaning and the language of this. Because this was never about women against men. This is not about Hindus against any other faith or any other philosophy. What this is about is what is the gaps in our thinking today that actually could be helped with something that we already have. And I genuinely believe there is some deep thinking that needs to go into what Falguni was talking about, what we already have, what was there but somehow got corrupted. And to that point, this is where I think the leadership point comes in. Women have to be better at putting their voice forward, and Hindus have to be better at putting their voice forward, because too often someone else is telling us what we think, what we are about. And perceptions have developed in the West, both about Hindus and Hindu women, that are really hard to shift now. So I remember when I started my law firm training contract, I wanted to be in the corporate media department, which also did sports. And it was like, well, Indian girls don't do sports. You know, forget knowing sports, they can't even do them. Right. And then it wasn't until Bend It Like Beckham came out, then suddenly it was, oh, Jahnavi, are you the one that was on that film? I was like, oh, for goodness sake, there isn't just one Indian that can play sport, and it has to be an actress to do that. So we have to find a voice. And to Brachi's point, I think that's really important what she was talking about. Certain traits that we as Hindus and as women have are often seen as weaknesses. But leadership isn't always about, like I said, power and authority and a title. Isn't sometimes it's leading from the back. And those invisible traits and invisible leaders are actually so much more important to the fabric of society. And that, I think, has been forgotten. But I think we all need to rise. If in the West at the moment, we need a louder voice. And if that means going and doing things like you're doing here, Vipasha, with the social media and on YouTube, if that means being out there and being better at being our own voices, we really need that. And I think women don't do that enough. And I certainly think Hindus don't do that enough, because everywhere I go, the first two questions they'll pretty much ask me, well, first, when they look at me, it's usually something like if we're doing an event, oh, you don't eat pork, right? That's the first thing that I'm usually asked about. Finally, when I get round to I'm a Hindu, oh, you're the ones that have arranged marriage and caste system. It's as if that is the only perception of Hindus. And we as women really have to do more, but both in educating ourselves, but everyone says educate a woman and you educate a family. Now, we really have to live up to that. No point just saying that. So we have to be able to really change those narratives and perceptions, because, like I said, paying it forward, give to gain, is giving that knowledge, the real knowledge, to the next generation, to others around us, so that we really do lead from whatever context we're in.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if we pick on that give to gain, which I think is a really fantastic theme, actually, and I know it's a theme that all of us here can relate to. If we look at Prachiji, the examples you spoke about, really the core of what these women were doing and what many women today are doing is living up to the standard of give to gain, giving, teaching people around them, creating opportunities for people around them. So what are some of the other values and character traits that you think women, that I'm just picking on those examples because you shared them, but feel free to share some others, women from that history that some of us learn about. What are some other examples that you can talk about, and how we can implement them in a very realistic way in today's life that all of us live?
Can I start on that? So the examples I gave were from history, and coming to the theme of this year's International Women's Day about give to gain, and about prosperity, how like if women are developed, then we can lead to prosperity. So taking that theme, Bharat traditionally had enjoyed the prosperity like any other country till 200 years ago. Bharat was contributing to 33% of the world GDP. I'm sure that prosperity wasn't gained just male working, doing all these work. There was a huge women contribution in all these trade and commerce. I can give you some examples of that. It is even from when we listen stories about gopis, they are going to sell their buttermilk or milk products to their market, and then Krishna is taking their product, he's stealing their product. So they were entrepreneurs. Even you come forward a little bit, in the story of Shankaracharya debating with Mandan Mishra. In that debate, Mandan Mishra's wife was a judge of that debate. So they hold that status of power. Now, in recent examples that I gave you about Ahilyabai Holkar, she created the opportunity of doing the encouraging business of Maheshwari saris. So there was again products. Indian textile market was huge at that time, and it used to be exported, and that's how India was gaining prosperity. So in all this journey of India's prosperity, women had a huge part in doing that work. So we need to shift that mindset that women were not doing anything in Bharat traditionally. They were actively involved in all these professions. I think after industrialization, the model of work changed because previously mainly the products were done professionally at home. The family used to do these products where women have opportunity to contribute in production in that process. When it shifted to mass production in factories, that link broke because then women, their primary duty, as we see, is to nurturing children, which is then they had to stay home, and then they'll lose that link to contribute. And then in that, I think that shift had come there. So then the male dominance had increased, and all these policies now we see, or the structures we see in corporate world as a result of that, where there is detachment from these values of adaptability, flexibility, inclusivity, and just a mindset of commanding and just ordering people to do things. So I think that's where we need to change the narratives about how women were in the past, how they were, and in Bharat they had that opportunity to contribute, make decisions, and do this. And that's how we see all these examples that doing great work when people like women in the West didn't even have power to vote. So that needs to be explained, and that knowledge needs to be given to people to change that narrative, I think.
Yeah,
That's all that.
absolutely. There is so much that we can take from that, and even sometimes those examples might seem very far removed and difficult to relate to. But like you said, it's not just about telling the stories; it's about understanding the meaning and trying to pick apart. Okay, what can we learn from that? What is the essence of that person, of that character, and how can we apply it today? Because although on the surface things might seem very different, the same societal challenges I think still exist today. So if we move on a bit and take some of the points that you all were putting forward. So Falguniji, I'm going to come to you. You spoke a lot about your personal experience, about your personal path, and following your dharma, and how just the experience of how it's been to try to shed the expectations of what has been crafted as the path that a woman should go down. So how can women distinguish between social conditioning and following their dharma or their calling or their truth?
Oh God, that seemed like a really long question, Vibhasha.
That's all right. Take your time.
So I think fundamentally, us women who probably have a lot more time now and probably successful in our careers, and it's a stage of life when we can really start tapping inwards a bit more. And I know it's really cliche, everyone talks about it, but that's personally what I found, that we do have that freedom. Going through all these stages of life, I just think has strengthened our resilience. And if it hasn't, then work on that, because being confident in who you are, no matter what stage, whatever status you may be, married or not married, or, parent or not parent, and actually don't use that as something limiting or lacking. In fact, embrace that it is as it is. We cannot change it. And there's so much of our spiritual kind of teachings that talk about being present, being, really appreciated. We can't look backwards, because then it just fills us with remorse. Yeah, the more forward we look, things of we end up getting anxious, or the fear kicks in. So it is about being present. And there are lots of different ways that we've been taught that, through meditation, through kirtan. So it's basically trying to engage yourself, strengthen yourself internally. And I think that's the only way we're going to be able to feel more whole. And that's going to be an ongoing journey. I don't think anyone's going to grasp it in a matter of a day or a year. So I think deepening that self-awareness, which will then, I think, help us not just to grow spiritually, but then it actually will start making us think how we need to serve more as well. Because we do have ample, for me, I feel like, yeah, I've probably got lots of time, and lots of other women out there, especially where even the ones that who've got kids, they've probably got an empty nest right now. Yeah. And they're probably thinking, what do I do with myself? And the first thing everyone talks about, go traveling, which is great. That really does broaden your horizon. But there are other things that we can do as well. So then it's just about, again, just kind of like deepening our understanding of dharma. There are so many organizations out there, whether it be, ISKCON, it could be Chinmay Mission. I mean, I'm part of the Philosophy Society, and, join those. There's wonderful courses that you can, start learning and actually practically applying our philosophy. So, I just think that's one thing our women, whatever stage of life there is, can do to, grow.
Yeah, and it's a constant
question, by the way. I felt a little bit waffled a bit.
No, that was a great answer. And you're right. I think it's a constant journey. We're constantly evolving. There's no point at which you're like, yes, I am a complete woman. I know everything there is to know about myself, or about womanhood, or about the people around me, or about this world. And just being open to that. And maybe that in and of itself is quite a feminine quality of being open to learning and constant growth.
Absolutely. When you can love yourself, you can then love others. Like yoga is another thing. Yoga, it's just something I don't personally connect with fully. I wish I could, and I'm sure it's part of my journey going forward. But right now it isn't. But that doesn't mean it can't be. So, we just got to find what we connect with in the interim whilst we keep growing.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about journeys, so Janhvi, you outlined sounds like some pretty unfortunate, like at the start of your career, were you the one on Bend It Like Beckham? But I think maybe especially as Hindu women, and all of us on this panel as Hindu women who are in the workplace, at some level we can probably relate to that, that being the token woman, the token minority, sometimes the token woman and minority joined up together. That in itself is a whole webinar to unpack of women in the workplace and everything that comes with it. So I want to talk to you a bit about that. So in a lot of corporate environments, diversity conversations are really important, but they often focus on gender or race, importantly, but they actually rarely focus on cultural worldview, not religion, but cultural worldview. So how has being a Hindu woman shaped how you approach leadership or decision-making at work?
Yeah, great question, Vibhasha. And if I can just pick up a thread that Falguni said as well there, I think what she was talking about is self-awareness as a starting point. And that is true for any leadership journey. Yeah, if you don't know what you are, you don't know what you can contribute. So, but I think that has to be the starting point of your leadership journey, that I want to learn about myself because I want to contribute. If self-awareness is about self-realization for self's sake, for me, that's not what drives me. And so I think self-awareness is so important. And I agree with Falguni, there's different ways we can do it. The second thing I would add to that is time, right? And maybe it's an unpopular thing to say in the current corporate world, because I get lots of people just talking about work-life balance and all of these issues that are, of course, they're important. I'm not belittling them, but nothing I have achieved has come from not spending time and hard work. People may not want to hear that, but if you want deep insight into anything, you have to spend time, and it comes with sacrifices. So it comes with having to make choices. Being in leadership roles of any kind, being a mother, being a woman, comes with making choices, right? And what choices you make require time if you really want to make the right choice. And often I think we are heavily influenced in decision making, in all of these things, with the language around us. Yeah. So your comment about diversity being, it's so easy to say diversity is about physical traits. And that's all they ever focus on, because they're the easy ones. Because usually I can tell a woman versus man. Usually I can tell if they're brown or white. Although you get all the intersectionality of all of these things, you can normally tell what is not the norm. And that's how the West has defined, or that's how in practice it's easier to put diversity into play. But it was never really about that. And certainly in the Hindu philosophy, it's everyone, as Falguni talked about, has a swadharma. Yeah, you start there. But, and here's the point I really hope people really move forward on, is that can you spend a little bit more time dedicating to outside Swadharma once you've started Swadharma, right? And our Hindu philosophy sees us in the middle of this big spiral that is the universe. And what we have to be doing, if we really want self-realization, if you want to be selfish about it and you really want for yourself, actually, unless you go up that spiral and start doing things for the universe, you will never achieve self-realization. So it's very important that we move beyond that personal materialism to get to that next stage. And like I said, that you need time. So if in the workplace, we need people to be more confident, to be bolder in how we make decisions. And sometimes it's the smallest acts that can do that. So don't underplay the small acts. So, for example, I recently went to a venture capital firm, and it was fascinating. At lunchtime, everybody there was a meat eater. I mean, half of them were from like Uruguay, where the only food you have is a barbecued steak or something like that, right? But at lunchtime, every single person had to order vegan. They don't, and it was an unwritten rule. They never said it to the guests. They said, we do not force it on the guests, but our default for all of us in the office is that we will order vegan. And they said it took us some time. It took us a lot of time to actually move to that. Now, the same thing in a fintech that I was on the chair of, I tried to bring that in, because actually this is good for society. The amount of food I see wasted at the events that I'm doing. Yeah. And, it's a cultural thing. It's certain parts of the world that I go to, LATAM, Chile, the Middle East. It is, I mean, it's almost grotesque the amount of food that they are giving to us. Every break time, you have to have shelf loads of it, and it has to look good. Yeah, and it's a cultural thing. They want to feed you, and I get it. It's a nice cultural thing. But one of the things I said to them is, but where does this food go if we don't eat it? Yeah, how much waste have we had? And I just said, one small change we can make, perhaps, is you make it the default as vegetarian. or I didn't go as far as vegan, but I said, make the default vegetarian. Why? Because nobody can say no to vegetarian. Yeah? Whereas with meat, there is this, there will be a certain proportion of people that just can't eat it. Yeah. So this wasn't for me a philosophical, ideological, oh, we must all be vegetarians. But actually, from the perspective of sustainability, is that something? And that small act may make a difference. And I'm not saying it from the position of every single, I'm not trying to change people's ideologies on whether you eat meat or not. But that default, but how many people have done that in the workplace? We find it comfortable to do it in our own environments because it's easy. How many of us have tried to make small changes in the workplace? Yeah. So every so often at a work event, I'll wear Indian clothes. Because how much are we used to seeing younger generation Hindu women wearing a bindi or wearing Indian clothes? Yeah. My mother always did it. And in some ways, we've lost that bravery as young people. We want to fit in even more. Yeah, but actually, if we're really truly celebrating diversity, why are we scared of celebrating our own diversity? Yeah, so please don't talk to me about diversity in the workplace if it really isn't truly diversity of thought, diversity of everything we do. And I think that is something we can really move. And in decision making, it's absolutely critical. It's something that I do a whole day on this about cognitive biases in people's thinking and how decision making, and a nice one for all the girls to know here, just so that you can see. I think sometimes as girls, we take too much on. We want to change everything, right? But really focus on one thing and then commit yourself to that one thing. And the reason I wanted to give you this, whether again it's nature or nurture, I don't know. It's a statistic that I learned recently and I love it. And it's one that I'm going to start telling everyone. So men and women of the same ages, and I don't know what the sample size was, but it is research that's been published, were told to do an exam. Okay, and they all did it in their exam in their normal clothing. Okay, then they were all told to wear swimwear and do the same similar exams. Okay, the men performed exactly the same when they did it in the swimwear. Women dropped significantly when they had to do it in their swimming costume. Why? We care about what we wear. We're thinking about, how do I look? Well, what's going on here? And we've lost our focus on what was the task, which was the exam. Right? So if I can say this to every single girl, do not think about what others think of you. Do not sit there worrying about image. And it's a real huge burden on us because the press does it, our peers do it, social media does it. Yeah, and that's true whether you're Indian or whether you're anyone else as well. But if you can focus on a task and spend time on it, I can guarantee you your decision making will be better.
Yeah, I mean, that statistic or what you shared, that anecdote, really interesting. And I think as soon as you said the swimwear line before you introduced the next part, I knew where it was going. And I think maybe we can all relate to that. It's because there is that conditioning, there is that societal expectation of, okay, looking a certain way. I mean, I'll hold my hands up even for this webinar. I'm sat with a bit of makeup on, I'm sat with a nicer outfit on, and there is that there is that thing that you feel like it's not performative, but people expect us to look and do things a certain way, so we will do things a certain way. And I think that's a really important statistic that you shared, and hopefully one that resonates with a lot of us. So we're reaching near the end of our webinar. So I'm just going to ask the last few questions, and these are more sort of broad, general ones, before I ask all of you to just wrap up your final few points. So I'll start with Prachi, and this question is the same for all of you. How can we honour the differences between men and women without turning them into limitations. I think, maybe there's this perception that feminism is pitting men against women. Being a proud woman, being a bold woman, being an empowered woman necessarily means that I know that men are inferior, and that's not the case, right? I think, we've said a lot today about how it's about balance. But it would be really good for the audience, I think, to hear from you guys your perspective on how we can honor the differences without turning them into limitations, but whilst also unlocking what women need to empower themselves. So, Prachiji.
Yes, I think it's a good question. And that reminds me of a word called Sahadharmacharini. So it is in the marriage perspective, but that word's mean who follows dharma with you. So when a woman gets married, she is called Sahadharmacharini of her husband. So they are following the same path of dharma. So they are not against each other, they are together in this. So they are complementing each other. So that is the concept of our dharma, that nobody is inferior. They are just complementing each other. And I think that's how, if women are raised with that idea, that you are not inferior, you can do anything. It's just that, as I started, we have that capacity of adaptability and flexibility, which is natural to us. So, with that mindset, if we go somewhere, and it's not something conditioning, I had been told by a pediatrician when my son was born that there are inherent differences in a girl child and a boy. Naturally, boys are naturally demanding; they make more noises. Girls are a little bit adaptive. They are cordial. They will not express that much demands. There are so these natural differences, and it's easier to change women's mind rather than boys' mind after a certain age. It's not against conditioning. That's how we are naturally because our bodies, our minds are constantly changing. So there are inherent differences in a man and woman, but they are not in against each other. We just need to combine them in a right way to go forward. And I think that's where we need to see us, not against men, but we are complementary and we can adapt ourselves in a faster way and much effectively to bring us both forward.
Great. Falguniji, your thoughts?
So personally, I think we have a great example of the Ardhanarishvar where we've got, Parvati and Shiv as one. And we fully need to understand to develop the entire world, we need both men and women. There's no superiority between either of them. And the more we kind of start understanding that, then we will appreciate the masculine energy as well as the feminine energy, because both need to exist, and some who are in leadership, women who are in leadership may, dominate in the masculine energy, but that doesn't mean there isn't space for feminine energy in there. I think in the society we live in, we've often been told to kind of, be much stronger, be this, be that, and kind of oversee the more feminine qualities like nurturing, like being more compassionate, which I think naturally comes to women, is an innate quality rather than perhaps men. And I'm not being judgmental, but it's just certain qualities is present in both of them. So for us, I think as women, we need to appreciate those feminine qualities. That doesn't mean you're subordinate to a man. And I think really, really start respecting each other. I think we can learn a lot from men. I've got some amazing examples of men in my life, and I'm sure we all do. And if we don't, then find other role models. We might not have been fortunate to have the best partners or the best family members, but there are enough wonderful men out there as well, who will help you grow yourself as well. And ultimately there's lots of women as well, so engage with them, and I do think it's really important for both to exist.
And Janviji?
Yeah, well, I do think women are superior to men, so I'm going to contradict everyone. But but in certain things, right? So let's be honest, men and women are not equal. And equality is the wrong metric to measure on, right? Equality of opportunity, even that, I think, is a distant way away, because you need systemic changes for this. So to give you an example, even for equality of opportunity, and I'll read this because I don't want to get the stats wrong, but globally, women around the world, and this is women of all faiths and different backgrounds, 76% of all unpaid work, care work, is done by women. It's unpaid, right? That's childcare, household management, elderly care, looking after the parents and grandparents, whatever. Even in UK, it's still about 60% of unpaid domestic work is done by women. And what this effectively means is women, we're doing 2 shifts, especially those of us that are working, right? So, and all the research shows us this carries through into the workplace as well, by the way. So we are more likely to be doing the organising, the mentoring, the smoothing team dynamics. So in some ways, gift to gain, that was my only sort of slight, what's the word, hives that I broke out. And I was like, you don't need to teach women this one. You probably need to put it for International Men's Day, right? Because actually the idea of charity, the idea of giving, we do it inherently. Right. And there's some brilliant stats out there as to, if you gave men a certain amount of money, what would they spend it on? Themselves. Right. You give it to women, they would feel guilty if they didn't spend it on their parents, their kids, their doing their house up and bedroom up, and something that's going to have some tangible impact on more people. Right. And I can say this because a lot of what I do is training. Most men have spent 10 grand on their own training, whereas women will not come on training because they see that as a luxury for themselves. Right? So there is a systemic point about equality of opportunity as well, right? And how we measure, like I said, what value really is. Yeah, if you put value to all the work that women are doing, we are superior, full stop, right? If you put a financial value and if your metrics is money. But again, what do kids perceive? And again, this was a really sad one. If you ask children, no matter which family they come from, they assume the dad is the breadwinner and is bringing the value to the family. Right? So this is a perception we must challenge. But I totally agree with everybody. This is not about one being hierarchically more than the other, right? What this is about is equity, right? And the concept that Prachi mentioned, just to be really clear, it's not just for the woman, it's for the man as well, right? So all of these concepts is about how do you create fairness. And I think it is uniquely Hindu to believe in equity inherently rather than equality. Yeah. So I say all the time that in our household, we are not equal, full stop. Right. So there are times the kids have to do certain jobs. There are certain times I will do it without anyone having to tell me. Right. But there are certain things we're going to have to tell society if we really want to make systemic changes. And that's my one urge from this for everybody, is really, really spend a little bit of time on one issue, one thought that comes from our Hindu Dharma. Learn it for yourselves, put it in practice for yourselves, but then go out there and really become the voice for that concept in your workplace, in the societies you're in the mandirs you're in, because we don't understand it enough ourselves. And if we want to make systemic changes, you've got to start that ripple effect. That was a long answer, I know, but
No, that was great. That was actually a really nice thing to end on. So thank you to all 3 of our panelists, Prachi ji, Falguni ji, and Janvi ji, for taking the time this morning, for joining us on International Women's Day and sharing what I know are lots of interesting and varied thoughts. And thank you to the audience as well. Thank you to those of you who joined us to celebrate International Women's Day, to learn more about what we all can be doing, and to dig into some of these concepts a bit deeper. So we spoke about so many things. I'm not going to recap them all, but I think in a nutshell, I think what we all can agree on is that we're blessed to be women, and I think whilst there might be limitations and whether that's societal, whether that is just genuinely, physical, once a month, all of these things.
And it goes on for the rest of your life, Vipasha. I hate to tell you this, but
God, you burst the bubble there.
You get to the other end and we start talking about some other things that start happening to your body.
So despite all of that,
I think it's something that is important to recognise, and as you said, it's happening throughout our lives.
Exactly. But despite all of that, I think all of us would say that we're blessed to be women, and we wouldn't change it for the world. And we recognise the power and the strength that we have, whether it's being adaptable, flexible, nurturing, listening, being empathetic, but also being fierce and absolutely capable, and being able to run things in an effective and an efficient way. And as a topic, womanhood, feminine, divine is vast, and we could talk about it for ages, but I'm really happy that we were able to draw on lots of different concepts. And just to finish on what Falguniji said, the idea of Ardhanarishwar is, I think, a brilliant way of understanding the Hindu perspective on this, and maybe that's something to explore in a webinar in the future. But again, thank you to our panelists for joining, thank you to the audience for joining, and happy International Women's Day to everyone.
Thank you for inviting us.